Hello, and welcome to another video. In this one, I am once again recording this audio in a dingy basement storage room, sitting on top of a freezer, because my bedroom is beneath people who are sleeping, and I don't want to wake them up. I will include a picture of the freezer that I'm sitting on top of. While you watch me play Forza Horizon 5, we're gonna talk about hoarding and things. I haven't really done a whole lot to compile any information for this video. I just kind of had a thought and decided that I was gonna record a video about this. So yeah, so the question that I had like a few minutes ago before I decided to start recording this about this is there a name for the false perception that hoarders have of everything being like normal, like, because I forgot what that one TLC show is called. I think it's on TLC, but like with all it might just be called Hoarders, but it's like, you see this person living in a house full of trash and stuff, and to them it's like, oh yes, this is completely normal, like, this is just my stuff, why are you judging me? This is just my house, and it's like, there's so much shit piled up that, like, you couldn't, like, it's like, I'll include an image of what I'm thinking of, like that block game where you slide the blocks around in the tray, and, like, if you were to try to move any stuff around in these hoarders' houses, it would be like that. Like, you'd have to, navigate the space, the little space that you're left with how much shit that they have, Yeah, so, and what Google said about that question, well, I can't really, it says, I'll put the word up, anosognosia, but, like it says, psychologists refer to the inability to recognize a hoarding problem as a lack of insight, or anosognosia. It is also commonly called poor or absent insight. And it's just, I don't know, like, because the whole hoarding thing, it's like it's like I saw this one episode of that Hoarders TV show where it was like this woman had, she believed that the biblical end of days was coming, Armageddon, and so she stocked her house up, with like all kinds of shit, preparing, quote unquote, preparing for Armageddon. And I guess she like completely filled up a trailer home and then moved to a different home and filled that one up, preparing for Armageddon. And it's like the thing that's happening is there's some kind of distress happening in the person's mind, and that gets projected into reality through, this collection of objects, material things. You know, it's like, when you're, when you don't feel safe or whatever, you start collecting, or, you're trying to have control over something in the world. You're trying to take that control back by having control over all this material shit, and so considering the fact that it's like a projection type of thing, it makes sense that, the person would have a lack of insight. Like, because if it's going on just as bad, if not worse, inside their head, and what you're seeing is just like an external projection of that, it's like, it just makes sense to them. The world that they've built for themselves just, it just makes sense. Like, it correlates with their mind, It also makes sense that they would have a lack of insight because, like, you just get used to it, I feel like, like, I feel like after so long of certain conditions, like, somebody would just kind of forget that that's, like, completely not normal, to have, like, a bunch of shit, So, yeah. So, another question that I had on this topic, is minimalism the opposite of hoarding? Because, that would make sense. Like, it would make sense that somebody who's like a major minimalist, or whatever label you want to put on them, like, they just live in a room with like a mattress and basic commodities and whatever, like, in my head it would kind of make sense that, like, that could be somebody who, like, had to live with a hoarder when they were younger, and they're like, I'm not gonna do this, but what I found just now is that minimalism is more intentional. It's less of a, like, hoarding is a psychological condition driven by a compulsive inability to discard items, whereas minimalism is a conscious, intentional decision. It's not like, and that just makes hoarding, like, I don't know, that answer, I guess, makes hoarding a little bit scarier, because it's like, this isn't derived, like, correlating with what I said earlier, it's like a mental, like, it's an external projection of what's going on inside of their head, it's just, like, freaky, because it's like, this is like mental illness, like, just straight up disease, just like addiction or depression or whatever, it's like, yeah, makes me feel really, like, sympathetic for people that, the hoarding shit happens to, or they they happen, you know, like, it's like, man, you know, like, they're going through something. That's, yeah. So, what, what it says that, like, the actual, polar opposite of hoarding is, you know, like, compulsive, hitting that same point as hoarding. It's just known as compulsive decluttering. The sometimes called or Spartanism, obsessive compulsive Spartanism. I assume that it's called Spartanism because the Spartans were very, like, their entire way of life was dedicated to being warriors and all of that, and they didn't give a fuck about, material shit. Yeah, so it says that where a hoarder is unable to part with items, an anti-hoarder or obsessive compulsive Spartanism person feels panicky, obsessive need to throw things away, sometimes discarding practical and necessary objects. So I picture that as, somebody somebody who needs the room to be empty, I guess. Like, I've never seen that in person. Unfortunately, I live with people that, I would say that they're a little bit overboard on the collecting of material objects, but I've never encountered somebody who, they compulsively needed to get rid of shit, I could see that as like somebody throwing their toothbrush away or something, like, oh man, this is just a piece of garbage, like, this is just a stupid little piece of plastic or whatever, yeah. It makes me wonder what, like, psychologically, I guess, could make somebody do that, Like, I, because of firsthand or secondhand, I don't know, but because of personal experience, I kind of understand what's going on inside of a hoarder's head, like, they need control, they need to feel like the world isn't falling apart, whatever. But I don't, like, somebody who struggles with Spartanism, like, that's just, I don't know. I mean, obviously we're gonna look at it, in speculation. The place that my mind goes to figure that out, I guess, would be like, what, like, under normal circumstances, what makes somebody want to discard items, and the simple answer for that is just, like, at least in my experience, is just having too much stuff, like spring cleaning, I get, like, clothes and whatever throughout the year, and then, by the time that, like, at a certain point, it's like, oh, I have too much of this stuff, so I'm gonna throw away some old stuff, donate it to charity or whatever, and, that way my space isn't as filled with stuff, So my thought is, what could make somebody feel that way? Feel like I have to, like I have too much stuff. Make somebody feel that way, like, all the time, like, just by having stuff, like, a lot of the time with the, with the hoarding, in the case, at least, that I refer to, it's that need for control is a result of trauma. Like, I didn't have control at all when I was younger, so now I need control over everything, type of thing. So the question is, like, what, like, understanding that sort of correlation with hoarding, like, what could, in that same sort of way, what connects the dots like that for Spartanism, So I'm gonna do a quick Goog. Okay, well, Google just completely, ass-raped everything that I was saying. Because what Google says, I don't know why it didn't say this originally, but it's direct correlation with obsessive compulsive disorder, which, I mean, I guess, like, it makes sense that it would refer to it as two separate things, because, it could be Spartanism as a behavior of OCD, but still, that's not cool, because I just spent a while talking about that. And obviously, we know what OCD is. It's, just intrusive, unhinged, like, compulsion thoughts, like, the whole, like, magic number thing, like, you're not good unless you do it like this specific number or whatever. Yeah, so, and that's derived from the same sort of thing as, the same sort of trauma genre as the hoarding thing. It's like that need for control, that, like, like, I didn't have control over my life or anything as a kid, so now I need to control everything compulsively and obsessively. Yeah. I guess if I hadn't have been actively talking, I probably could have connected the dots between Spartanism and OCD, but, the way I do this is I just hit record and think out loud for a little bit. But, yeah. Anyways, that's all I have to say about that.